Anti-war protester and co-founder of the Gold Star Families for Peace, Cindy Sheehan. She was in Washington today here at the National Press Club. This is 45 Minutes.
Good morning to everyone, and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Rudy Arredondo, a member of the National Press Club and the Newsmaker Committee. Before we start, I want to ask everyone to turn off your cell phones and pagers so that we can give our presenter our undivided attention. Thank you. Before I introduce our guest today, we have a little, some ground rules set for this event. If you haven't done so already, please don't forget to sign in at the end of the event. After I introduce our guest today, she will make her presentation for about 30 minutes, and we'll take questions from those of you who have joined us. I'd ask that when I call upon you, please identify yourself and the agency you are representing, or if you are a member of the club, please mention that as well. I just wish to remind you that the newsmakers are open only to members of the news media and members of the National Press Club. Transcripts, as well as archived video and audio of events held here at the club, are available on the website mpc.press.org. And now with the fine points out of the way, the reason we're here today. Joining us today is Ms. Cindy Sheehan, the co-founder of the Gold Star Families for Peace, a member of the After Downing Street Coalition, and a member of the Military Families Speak Out. She's a mother of Army Specialist Casey Sheehan, who was killed in action April the 4th, 2004 in Baghdad. Ms. Sheehan camped outside President Bush's Texas home this past summer in an effort to persuade him to answer the question, for what noble cause did my son die? And with that, Ms. Sheehan.
Thank you. It's great to be here this morning. I've been here for other press conferences, and so it was, thank you for inviting me this morning. I came to Washington, D.C. this week for the occasion of the 2000th American soldier who's been killed in Iraq since the invasion. We're here to mourn not only the 2000th, but all 2,000 of them. The last time I checked this morning, it was up to 2006. I believe, and my group, Gold Star Families for Peace, we believe that one death was unnecessary. We believe that every single one of them has been a tragic loss, not only for our families and for our communities, for this country and for the world. I know my son, Casey, was an amazing and indispensable part of our family. He was practically the best son parents could ask for. He was an altar server for 10 years. He was an Eagle Scout. He was in college for 3 years before a recruiter got a hold of him and lied to him. He always did everything he thought was right. He stood up for what he thought was right. A lot of people tell me, a lot of people in the right, a lot of people who are misinformed will say, well, Cindy, we don't have a draft. Casey volunteered. Casey volunteered to join the military. And then I'll say, well, yes, he volunteered. He volunteered because he was a fine, upstanding, and outstanding citizen of the United States of America. And he was sent to die, to perhaps kill other people, to fight, invade, and occupy a country that was no threat to the United States of America. And he was sent there by a person who used family ties and influence to get into an elite unit that knew they weren't going over to Vietnam. And he couldn't even handle that. He had to go AWOL from that unit. And then the vice president, during his Vietnam years, had other priorities. He received 5 deferments. These people who know nothing about the horrors and cost of war are devastating the world by their policies. So when people tell me that your son volunteered, I say, yes, he volunteered to serve his country, not to be misused and abused by a commander-in-chief and leadership who are using our children so callously. Not only did they send them on a wrong mission, on a bad mission, but once they got there, they're not equipping them properly, they're not training them properly, they're not giving them the right armor. When I talk to parents of dead soldiers all over the country, the refrain is, my child was killed doing a job that he or she was not trained for. Casey was a Humvee mechanic. He was killed in combat 5 days after he got to Iraq. I know people who joined the Navy and the Air Force so they could serve their country without the threat of being on the ground in this war. And people in the Navy and the Air Force are being taken off their ships and being taken off of their bases, trained for 2 weeks in Kuwait with weapons training, and put in country driving convoys, guarding oil fields, and that's not what they signed up for. So our leadership and what we're allowing our leadership to do is abuse our children, abuse our young people by misusing them this way. We are going to be having indictments coming up today, hopefully. And the indictments are based on the fact that Joe Wilson, Ambassador Joe Wilson, came back and said Saddam does not have weapons of mass destruction. And so he was going against the party line. He was going against what the administration was saying. So they had to, he was refuting their lies. So they had to do what they could to retaliate against Joe Wilson and his family. And this, just more than anything, proves to me, and it should prove to the nation and the world, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that what we're doing in Iraq is immoral and it's illegal. And we need to start bringing our troops home. They need to start coming home as soon as possible. Yesterday, John Kerry said that we should start bringing 20,000 troops by Christmas. Well, we have 23,000 extra troops there right now because of the election. So he's just bringing home the extra troops because of the constitutional referendum. That's not enough. Our troops start having to come home by Christmas. How joyful will that be for the families who have loved ones over there if their loved ones get to come home and spend Christmas with them? But there's over 2,000 families in America who Christmas will be, instead of a joyful occasion, will always be a depressing holiday. I will never get to spend Christmas with Casey again because of George Bush and his lies and his betrayals of this country. And the 2000th death was a tragic milestone. One was a tragic milestone, like I said. But these people, we can't look at them and say, you know, number 2000 was, number 2000, was an Army specialist or whatever. We have to personalize these losses for the American people because they were not numbers. You don't even know what Casey's number was. It was somewhere between 600 and 700. I don't care what Casey's number was because Casey was not a number. I already told you, Casey was a living, breathing, indispensable member of our family. And his loss has created a hole in our family that's never going to be filled. I'm sure our family's going to have happy times. We're going to have weddings, and we're going to have babies, grandchildren. Casey's going to have nieces and nephews, but that's never going to replace Casey. And for every joyful event we have, it's always going to be hard because Casey's going to be missing. And that's what we're trying to tell the American people, that you have to get involved in your democracy. You have to stand up for what you know is right. And bringing home the troops is right. And allowing George Bush and his administration to continue is wrong. Also, I know I've been accused of supporting terrorists by what I'm doing. George Bush had two rationales for going to war: weapons of mass destruction and links with Al-Qaeda and 9/11. Those have been proven to be wrong. There was not one terrorist in Iraq before we invaded Iraq. John Kerry said something that I disagreed with the other day, surprisingly enough. He said that he called them homegrown terrorists and out-of-country terrorists. I don't believe my son was killed by a terrorist. My son was killed by a Shiite militia person loyal to Muqtada al-Sadr. My son was killed by somebody who wants him out of the country. So if it was Americans trying to get an occupying force out of our country, we wouldn't be calling them terrorists. We wouldn't be calling the Americans who are trying to oust an invading country terrorists. We'd be calling them freedom fighters, insurgents, patriots. You know, most of the violence in Iraq is a homegrown insurgency, an insurgency against an occupation, because we are occupying their country. When our troops leave, the insurgency will stop because there won't be an occupying force in this country. And the only construction going on in Iraq are permanent bases. Permanent bases that are the size of Sacramento, California. So the people of Iraq are looking at this and saying the Americans are never leaving our country. And if we, the people, let our administration continue, that's their course of action, is to stay permanently in the Middle East, to use the bases of operation as a spreading point for their imperialism. And we have to stop this. We have to show the Iraqi people that we mean business by getting out, and we have to let them take over the running of their country. It's not the 51st state of America. And when people say, Cindy, you encourage the terrorists, you are an enemy sympathizer, I say that George Bush and his administration, by lying us into a war that had no basis in reality, invading this country, killing innocent people, we have to not only mourn the 2,000 Americans, but we have to mourn the over 100,000 innocent Iraqis that have been killed. Killing innocent people, he's the one that's encouraging terrorism. He's the one he's the best recruiter for terrorists. We are killing innocent people. George Bush is creating enemies of America for generations to come. I'm afraid he's creating enemies for my unborn grandchildren by what we're doing in Iraq. And the best thing to do now is to get our military out of there, start using our words. I always told my kids when they were growing up, you don't use your fists, you don't use your violence to solve problems, you use your words. And if my kids can learn how to talk out their problems by using their words, why can't these people who are running the world learn how to use their words and not always resort to violence? Violence isn't even the last resort. It's usually the first thing they think of. Condoleezza Rice is supposedly our head diplomat, and she never talks about a diplomatic solution to anything. She always talks about what's possible. We may have to use military force against Syria or against Iran. I don't believe we have a State Department anymore. I believe it's a branch of the War Department. We need to encourage a nonviolent solution to all problems. And as a very last resort, when all other things have failed, to defend our citizens, to defend our country. If we must do that, we must. And I know we're sitting here, all of us would defend our communities and defend our families. But what we're doing in Iraq is nothing about making America safer. All we have to do is look at Katrina for proof of that. They said that we had a small portion of our National Guard from those 3 Gulf states in Iraq. I had a congressperson tell me that they had 70% of their National Guard from those 3 states in Iraq. All of their equipment, our billions of tax dollars were over there. Katrina was a natural disaster, but the devastation occurred as was a man-made disaster, a Bush-made disaster. He waited for days before he even acknowledged that there wasn't a disaster down there. So what he is doing in Iraq is making America more vulnerable and less safe. And before we invaded Iraq, all the talking heads were going on, like Condoleezza Rice, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, telling everybody this was going to be a cakewalk, that it was going to take 6 months at the most. George Bush told Pat Robertson that there was going to be not one American casualty. They said it was going to just, take a minuscule amount of money and that would all be paid by oil revenues. Now, billions of dollars later, over 2,000 lives later, it has not been a cakewalk, and in fact, it's getting worse. We need to pull out. We're going to do it. We might as well do it soon before we get up to the 60,000 Vietnam level, before we get to millions of Iraqis killed. We can't bring back the ones who are already gone, but we can work to save the lives of the ones who are still in harm's way. There's an interesting statistic. Everybody always tells me, 2,000, that's not that much. That's just a drop in the bucket, somebody told me. Well, it's not just a drop in the bucket when one of those drops was your firstborn child. But it took 4 years in Vietnam to reach 2,000 dead Americans. It's taken 2.5 years in Iraq. So people on the right would like to always tell me, this isn't another Vietnam. And I say, you're right, it's not. It's worse than Vietnam. And we've heard George Bush say, we'll stay there as long as it takes to complete the job without making him define what that job is. We heard Donald Rumsfeld say it could take at least 12 years. So I want everybody to look at their babies as they take them off to kindergarten today and realize that if we allow the people in power to continue, they could be fighting this war. And if we allow the people in power to continue, our future generations will be fighting this war. It's time to stop the killing. I know 9/11 families who were horrified that George Bush used their tragedy to justify the killing in Iraq. And I know Gold Star families who are horrified that George Bush is using the continued killing in Iraq. He's using our children's deaths to justify the continued killing in Iraq. The killing has to stop. The killing has to stop, and we have to stop reducing the killing to numbers. We have to think, every time they tell us that 60 insurgents were killed in Iraq, we have to think how many of those insurgents were 6 years old, how many of those insurgents were babies, how many of those insurgents were grandparents. And always try to think about it in your context of life. How would I feel if somebody robbed a bank in Berkeley, California, and went over the bridge to San Francisco, and the law enforcement agents carpet bombed San Francisco for the crime of one person? What we're doing in Iraq is senseless. It doesn't even make any sense at all. Common sense says that the violence and the killing have to stop. And we have to work always towards peaceful and nonviolent solutions to everything. We are going to start a Camp Casey Peace Foundation, and the goal of Camp Casey Peace Foundation is to always encourage from family units to nations to work out a nonviolent, peaceful solution to all conflict. We're going to start this. We're going to have a Casey Austin Sheehan Peace Prize every year. It's going to be given to somebody under 30 years old who works and strives for peace. And I just saw an alarming statistic from MTV News today. 70% of the casualties in Iraq are under 30, and most of those are clustered around 21 years old. 21 years old, their life hasn't even started yet. Their lives haven't even begun, and they're over. And they and their families, what they considered their lives, are over. So I just want to urge everybody in this country, I just want to say that when they say that, you know, we have to do what we're doing in the Middle East to spread peace. You don't spread peace by killing. You can only spread peace by peace. And even if you're for this war, the killing has to stop. And we have to, like I said, use our diplomacy and use our words. It's time for that. It's past time for that. We shouldn't have ever invaded. The occupation has to end, and it has to end now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sheehan. Any questions? You stand up and identify yourself, sir.
Okay, I'll start. Rick Dunham, president of the Press Club. Big news in Washington today is the grand jury finally reaching the conclusion of its term in the Wilson affair. I was wondering how you analyze Vice President Dick Cheney's role in it from what we've learned over the last few weeks.
I've been really busy, so I haven't got to analyze a lot of things. But I believe that the corruption goes all the way to the top, and that this is encouraging to me because I believe the investigations are going to continue, especially after the indictments. And that's all that we've been asking for a long time. When the Downing Street memos were exposed, you know, last May, we thought that that would result in an investigation about the lies. And this, you know, these indictments, I think, are wonderful to be able to actually expose the lies, expose these people for what they are. You know, they only have their goals and their agendas in mind, and they'll walk over anybody to get to those, to use their agenda, to achieve their agenda. And I'm just really excited that finally somebody's going to be held accountable for the death and destruction that's been caused on this world. And that's all we want. We don't want revenge. We just want accountability. You know, we want justice, and justice is way different from revenge. And I think that this will be a good step. I just hope that it's allowed to keep on going, and that it gets the press, and not just the indictments. Those shouldn't be the big news. The big news should be why. Why are these people being indicted? They're being indicted because someone tried to expose their lies that were leading us to war. And if those lies had been exposed before the invasion, my son would still be alive. You know, if people had kept on hammering that instead of being like the rah-rah cheerleaders for this invasion, you know, there would be tens of thousands of families in this world who will still be whole. And that's what we need to do, is this. We have to link the indictments to the lies about the war. You know, and the war shouldn't continue. It never should have happened. And like John Kerry said when he came home from Vietnam, how can we ask a soldier to be the last one to die for a mistake? This was a lie and a mistake. And let's have the last soldier now. Let's not have any other soldiers.
Jerome Bernard from AFP. How do you expect to keep the momentum in the coming months for your movement? What kind of actions, except what you announced, about the price and the foundation?
There's several major actions coming up. On November 2nd, it's National. Help me out here. It's Drive Out the Bush Regime. The world can't wait. It's a national day of, I can't think this morning. It's a national day of strikes and rallies and vigils, and it's the first anniversary of the last election, and there's hundreds of events all over the country on November 2nd, Drive Out the Bush Regime. On November 17th, it's going to be a national sit-in day, and we're calling peace activists all over the country to sit in front of recruiter stations. There's been a lot of lies about recruiters that recruiters lie to our children. There's a lot of misinformation that our children are getting from recruiters, and we do a lot of counter recruitment. We do a lot of truth in recruitment. My son was lied to. He had about 5 lies his recruiter told him, and what people don't realize is once the recruit signs the enlistment contract, it's only binding on the government. It's not binding. I'm sorry, it's only binding on the recruit. It's not binding on the government. So the government can say anything they want to our kids to get them in the military. And then once they're in, they don't have to fulfill their side of the bargain. So we do truth in recruiting, and we're just doing civil disobedience like we've done all week at the White House. And they don't have to be big, major things. People can do things every day. People can go out to their high schools and pass out things that show the kids how recruiters lie to them. And not only how recruiters lie, but what's the alternative to joining the military? This country is very militaristic, and it's getting more so. By this economy we have, this war economy, and from the natural disasters, it's taking money out of our communities. And a lot of times the children think the only recourse they have is to join the military, and we have to show them no, that there's other ways to go to college. So you can do little things every day. You can write to your congressperson. You can tell them to sign on to Jim McGovern's bill that he's going to introduce a bill saying that we can't use taxpayer dollars to fund the war anymore. It's an illegal war. It hasn't been declared. We shouldn't be using taxpayer money to fund it. They can sign on to Dennis Kucinich's resolution asking for an investigation of the White House Iraq group. So we can go sit in our congresspeople's office and sit down and say, we're not leaving until you start calling for immediate withdrawal of the troops. And there's vigils going on weekly basis all over the country. There's a Camp Casey in Union Square, New York. They're doing Camp Casey's at Senator's office every Friday all over the country. And the momentum is there, and it's building every day. Thank you.
Marco Bardazzi, Italian News Agency, ANSA. I would like an update on your legal situation. How many times have you been arrested, and what kind of legal problems do you face now? And second, are you concerned by the fact that it seems that you have much less media coverage now than in the past few weeks?
I don't ever want the media coverage to be on me. I've only wanted to focus on being on the Iraq war. And I believe that the media in our country really also abrogated their responsibility to be checks and balances on our government, that our media sometimes only reports the press releases they get from the White House, and they don't do any investigative reporting. They don't ask the hard questions. And I felt abandoned by the media. I felt abandoned by our elected officials. That's why I went down to Crawford, because I thought if somebody's not going to ask the hard questions, I'm going to ask them. And I believe that even if there is not a mother sitting in a ditch in Crawford, Texas, or even if there's not a mother laying down in front of the White House doing civil disobedience, that the focus always should be on the war in Iraq, that the indictments are going to come down and they're going to talk about the indictments and not about the connection between the lies about the war and the connection that we shouldn't be there and we should be bringing our troops home. So I think the media has abrogated their responsibility as being checks and balances on the government. The war should be the #1 story in every newscast, and it should be on the front page of every paper. Our country should know what is going on over there. And my legal situation is I have a trial date coming up on November. It's a court date. It's not a trial. It's a court date, November 16th, for my first arrest on September 26th. And I got a $75 fine, and I'm not going to pay that fine. I'm going to go to my court date. Then I'll get a trial date for my offense. I'm going to plead not guilty because I sat down on the White House sidewalk, which is a misdemeanor, and it shouldn't be a crime because that's our sidewalk. You know, they always say in America we have freedom of speech and freedom to peaceably assemble, and that's what we were doing. And so we were arrested for sitting on our sidewalk when there's people in the White House who are committing crimes against humanity. And that's what we're protesting, those crimes against humanity, and they're running free to keep on committing their mayhem and their crimes. So maybe me going to trial will also put the war on trial. We'll put the people who sent our children to war on trial, and that's what I'm hoping for. And I believe that to ratchet it up a notch, that we do have to do nonviolent civil disobedience in this country, and we don't all have to come to Washington, D.C. to do that. You know, there's plenty of work to go around this whole country. You know, you can go to federal buildings, you could go to your congresspeople's office, your senator's office, and if they're not calling for an end to the occupation of Iraq, sit down and say, we're not leaving until you do. You know, we're not leaving until the people who have done this to America are brought to justice, until our troops are brought home. And I was arrested the other night also, and I just think that it's so important for us right now. This is the time in our history to give everything we have, to invest everything we have, our time, our talents, our money in peace, and to make our country more secure so the future will have a future. And I'm willing to invest whatever it takes to make sure that my children and their children will have a world to live in. I want to leave them a better world than I left my son, Casey.
I'm Al Milliken, affiliated with Washington Independent Writers. Would you say anything about your personal faith? Has your own faith been strengthened or weakened since the death of your son, and by your reaction and your actions since then?
My own personal faith in a creator.
Yeah, I don't know if you. Actually, maybe I'm making an assumption that you have a faith in a higher power.
Yeah, I was. Yes, definitely. I was for 8 years a Catholic youth minister, and I raised my children Catholic, and faith issues were always really important to us. We always looked at the gospel, you know, and what we're doing to the world is so anti-gospel. You know, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. One of the commandments is thou shalt not kill. You know, and Jesus is not a warmonger. Jesus was the Prince of Peace. And I know I'm taking that off of my personal faith and putting it on somebody else. But I believe I'm going to see my son again. I believe my son, you know, died in a state of grace. And I believe by what I'm doing to try to make the world a better place is the right thing to do. So I believe I'll see Casey again. And I just have to always do what I think is right. And I think that what I'm doing corresponds and correlates to what I believe in. And without, you know, getting too personal, because it is personal, and without preaching, yes, it has strengthened my faith walk. Thank you.
Ron Bajents, work for Kuwait News Agency. I noticed you making reference to driving the Bush administration out and bringing justice. I've heard you say both of those things. And my question is, you have links to many activities which you've mentioned. Do you believe that the president should be impeached? Do you believe he's committed crimes that deserve impeachment? And is there any people in Congress that you've been in touch with who might be considering any such avenues?
I believe that, well, I believed when the Downing Street memos came out to prove that they fixed the intelligence around the policy of invading Iraq, that was their goal, was to prove that Saddam had WMDs and ties to al-Qaeda, that their goal was to cherry-pick intelligence and fabricate intelligence. And when I saw the Downing Street memos, I believed at that point that they had committed high crimes and misdemeanors. And I believe that is an impeachable offense. And do you know anybody in Congress that has done this? You know, and that's what we're trying to do, is we only, like I told this gentleman here, we only want an investigation. You know, they have to introduce the articles of impeachment to have an investigation, and that's all we want. You know, and if it proves that they didn't commit high crimes and misdemeanors, fine. Then he gets to, you know, spend out the rest of his days either in Crawford or here, you know, being president of the United States of America. But if it does turn out that he did, then he has to be impeached. And at the Downing Street memo hearings that John Conyers held, that's what I said. I said, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. When you take your oath of office, you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. You swear allegiance to our Constitution. And the Constitution is clear on this. You don't swear allegiance to your party. You don't swear allegiance to George Bush. You swear allegiance to the Constitution, and that's your job. You know, that's your job. And if they don't have anything to hide, then let's go forward with this. You know, let's either exonerate the people in power, or let's do what the Constitution demands and, you know, excuse them from that power.
Al Milliken again. I was wondering if you had a specific response to the statement that was released by the Gold Star parents and military families. I see, you know, it's signed by Gold Star families and Blue Star families. Did you have an opportunity to read that specifically?
No, I
because it's
didn't.
out by the elevators.
Right, no, I didn't. I haven't had a chance
But
to
I
read.
mean, just a few things they're saying. They said they're thoroughly disgusted with Cindy Sheehan and her publicity stunts. We're angered that Mrs. Sheehan is once again using our fallen loved ones against our wishes. Her macabre die-ins in front of the White House do not honor the dead, nor do they help the living. And her continued abuse of our loved ones makes our blood boil, and we demand that she stop trivializing their sacrifices with her tawdry acts.
Yeah, I have an answer to that. Number one, I know that there's families whose child or loved ones have died in the war that don't agree with what I'm doing, who still have to believe in the mission, to think that their child didn't die in vain. And I've always said, if that's what they have to believe to get through the day, that's what they have to believe. I never claimed to represent them, or I never claimed to speak for them. And I believe, and I have demanded, that George Bush stop using my son's sacrifice to continue the killing. And these Gold Star families who have to, you know, believe in the president and believe in the mission, I know the pain they're going through. I know the pain they wake up with every morning. And we have more in common than we have in differences. But I want to say to them, I'm not the only one that's demanding an end to this war. I founded Gold Star Families for Peace. We represent 100 soldiers who have died, who also are demanding an end to the killing. I was a mother. I still am a mother. I was a mother of 4, and now I'm a mother of 3. On April 4th, I fell down on the ground screaming in agony because I found out my son was killed. And why? Because my son was killed. Would I want one other mother to feel the pain that I'm feeling? We have Gold Star Families for Peace behind us. Military Families Speak Out have almost 3,000 members. They have loved ones serving in the military. They call for an immediate end to the occupation. We have Veterans for Peace behind us, and we have Iraq Veterans Against the War behind us. And we are all united in ending this war. And I will do, like I said, I will invest whatever it takes to make sure that not one other family is devastated by the lies and betrayals. And I'm not going to stop, but I demand that George Bush stop. I demand that George Bush command his generals to bring our troops home, and that's when the killing is going to stop. Thanks for the question.
Hi. My question is,
Would you identify yourself?
oh, Rebecca Carroll, Associated Press. Along with that, the die-in was striking for some people. Do you think your message is getting stronger and your actions? And if so, I mean, are you afraid of possibly alienating some of the people you'd want to be reaching? That's my...
Am I afraid of alienating some people I want to be reaching? By what?
But is your message getting stronger? That's my...
I believe that my message has always been the same. You know, this war is based on lies. Not one person should have died. You know, now we have over 2,000 dead. Bring the troops home. That's my message. I don't know if that's getting stronger, but the support of the nation is getting stronger. You know, we have polls, 62% of Americans believe this war is wrong and want our troops to start coming home. Only 32% believe the president is handling this war right. His approval ratings are, you know, lower than any other president in history. And that shows me that support for what we are doing is growing. And it's not about me. It never has been about me. It's always been about bringing the troops home. And if I can use this platform I have now to do good in the world, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you. I have to take one more question. I have a meeting.
Okay. I'm Nami Inoue from Tokyo Broadcasting System, a Japanese TV. I was very, very impressed last month at like how many people gathered here in Washington, D.C. in support of you. And month has passed. And do you see any change in the mood? Because I think there might be a little, like you said there's like growing support in the public, but I kind of feel there might be a little less support in the public now compared to 1 month ago, because less maybe enthusiasm in the public. Do you think like the public can keep up that enthusiasm, and how do you make the public like keep up their enthusiasm and interest in this?
Well, that was right. There was hundreds of thousands of people here on September 24th. Those big rallies are important to all get together and say we all have a mission of ending this war. We're all against what our country is doing in Iraq. And it's important to get together and to give each other energy and to give each other enthusiasm and give each other support. And I know those big rallies are important, but like I said earlier, we have to keep it going in our own communities. You know, the other night there were hundreds of vigils and rallies and demonstrations across the nation mourning the loss of 2,000 soldiers. And people have to do things every day, like I said before, you know, write your congressperson, go to your congressperson, go to your senators, you know, go to a recruiting office, go to a high school, you know, just to raise awareness. And it's not always going to be big, glamorous things that we're doing. You know, it has to be little things every day that everybody has to do. And we, as leadership in the movement, have to give these people the encouragement to keep on doing it. I go to rallies, like I go to a rally almost every day, or a meeting or whatever, just to tell the people what you're doing is so vitally important. It's so vitally important for our democracy. It's so vitally important for our future. And please keep it up. You have my full support, and I appreciate your support. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everybody.
behalf of the National Press Club's New Mexico Committee, Ms. Sheehan, thank you so much for your presentation, your appearance, and for the work that you do. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.